Today's date is May 29th, 2024. My name is Jacob Stickle. I'm the archival assistant here in Warren County.
My name is Amber Stegner. I am the imaging support here at Warren County.
And I'm John Tkatschenko,
Thanks
living at 1747 South Nixon Camp Road.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. You didn't have to list that part if you wanted to, but starting out the oral history. So, what's your official title?
Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. It's made of 5 supervisors, and I'm one of the 5. We're elected officials. We have a three-year term, and I'm at the end of my second third-year term. So.
Okay, so you've been there for 5 or 6 years then.
Yeah, there'll be an election coming up in August or September, whenever they decide it's going to be the official date, and I'll probably be in that election. So.
Okay, feel confident? You don't have to talk about that if you don't want. When and where were you born?
I was born in Heidelberg, Germany, 1946. And Heidelberg, Germany is in the American zone. It's about 30 miles south of Hamburg, Germany. Yeah, it's a port in the northern part of Germany. And it was kind of a Army emergency hospital center, not an official big building that we think of as a hospital. It's kind of like a field hospital. And I was born there. My parents were displaced that were running away from communism, and wound up being in Germany as displaced persons. And we came here in December of '49 to New York, Ellis Island, went through that. And then my parents found employment in South Dakota.
All over the place, though.
Yeah, because back then they kind of asked, do you have any specialty, or, are you good in any field or anything? And my parents were basically laborers. Dad was a blacksmith by trade, and mother just as a field worker. And they worked on a sugar beet farm, big sugar beet farm. And so they knew that culture, and they had like 10 acres or so, that they lived on. Orchard, 2 cows, 2 horses, 20 chickens, that kind of stuff. Kind of like America was, way back in the 1780s, 1800s. So.
Bit of a throwback then.
Yeah.
Did that prepare you for your current position, would you say?
Well, I think I liked having the connection with land and soil and plants, even though, usually when you were in that relationship is because your father told you, well, go weed that row of corn or pumpkins or whatever, and go spread the manure or whatever. So you kind of did what your parents tell you to do, and after a while you get comfortable with it, and so you start understanding and learning all the little reactions to this or that you do with the plants and the soil, etc., etc.
You naturally learn it from there on out, huh?
Yeah, well, I later on went to OSU and got a degree in agronomy and stuff, but that's kind of.
I'm sure that helped.
Different, yeah. So.
Did you grow up in South Dakota then?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, one of my sisters married a German bachelor. His name was Sigmund, and my dad worked for him also, and my sisters my sisters worked in a hotel in South Dakota in White River, and we lived there for roughly 5 years. And the reason why we moved there is that my parents started writing letters to people further east because Dad knew he was a blacksmith by trade, so he wanted to work with iron and steel because he understood that, and found out that Salem, Youngstown, Cleveland area, Pittsburgh, they had a lot of steel works and a lot of manufacturing. So Dad decided to move up and come back east. Wound up in Salem, Ohio, and he worked for the Salem Tool Company for about 20 years. Mother cleaned houses. We had went from a 10-acre farm to a 60-acre farm, and we basically had 10 brood cows and 200 chickens and that kind of stuff. And that's where I grew up most, let's say from 10 years old to college age, when you start college when you're 18 or so. So, and I worked nights for the Salem Magnetics Company and also from Damascus Metals. I was a furnace man. I put in ingots of aluminum into a furnace and got them warmed up to 800 degrees and then put them in a press and a big electric motor to push the press through a die, and it'd make things like aluminum windows, aluminum door frames, typewriter molding, aluminum parts in the car for a dash and stuff like that. Okay. But it gave me spending money. So.
And that was your time in college?
Yeah, well then once I turned, done with high school, Dad said, you got to make up your mind. What do you want to do? You want to be a blue-collar worker like me, or do you want to, have a cleaner, quote-unquote, job? So you better go to college. That was back when college was a big thing to accomplish. And finished at West Branch High School and enrolled at OSU. And then I got done with 4 years, got a degree in agronomy. I wanted to start out first and I got a degree in Russian language.
Oh.
And
well, I suppose you grew up speaking it, huh?
Well, Ukrainian and Russian are very, very close. Kind of like here in the United States, you have Southern dialect, and or brogue or whatever you want to call it.
A lot of Ukrainians have family in Russia.
I figured as much.
Yeah. So finished OSU there, and then got drafted. Served 2 years in service down in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And lucky enough, when I was there, the battalion commander needed somebody that could type. So, anybody in the, can type? Yeah, I had 4 years of college and I could type, so okay.
Get them in there.
Yeah, and so I wound up for being a clerk typist for the Army, the 70 Alpha 10. It was the MOS, Military Occupational Specialty. And when I was done with that, I was supposed to be a 36K20, which is a radio operator. Like when you go out, there's usually 3 people that are in every company: a captain or the leader, a radio man that carries, you always see them in the military, the radio pack on your back, and a point man, he's the one that goes out
in the field.
In the field, checks out where all the trip wires are and where all the machine guns, and then report back, hey, there's this and this and this over here, here, and here. So you better watch out for it. But so I was supposed to go to Fort Devens and never made it because my parents, came as immigrants and they had to get their citizenship papers, you know, because the Army didn't really. They said, "Oh, you're born in Germany. I don't know if we're gonna want you for a radio man, being in, from born Germany." Mm-hmm. So they said, "Could you have your parents send out their citizenship papers to us? You know, then we'll get it." And I served as a translator for my parents in Lisbon, Ohio. That was the court in Columbiana County, and they sent it in, and they sent it to me, and I gave it to the company commander. And by that time, that was kind of during the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. They had to maintain a strict schedule as to when 250 soldiers went through basic, and they had to go to this school or whatever school they had to go to. Right. And so I missed a day because they were waiting for the citizenship papers to come there, and they said, "Okay, you missed 4 Devons in the radio school," and they sent me as a clerk typist to Frankfurt, Germany.
Oh,
overseas
strange.
Instead of to Vietnam or Fort Polk or Fort Devens, and then go on to Vietnam. So that was a lucky break for me because I got to go to Europe instead of to Vietnam.
Yeah, more of your wheelhouse, I suppose, because you spoke more the languages there than Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, I thought maybe when you first go into the Army, they give you a questionnaire, what is your preference? That has nothing to do with what your preference is. Mm-hmm. I said, well, I'd like to go to the Monterey Language School and be an interpreter for the Army or something like that. And that didn't happen. I was a 70 Alpha 10, the clerk typist, or a Kelly girl that went to Frankfurt, and then out of Frankfurt they sent me about 30 kilometers to Hanau, and I was a clerk typist there for Major Yates at the 574th Personnel Service Company. Mm-hmm. And we kept the records for the U.S. Army personnel in northern Germany, and then there's another one that kept it for the personnel in southern Germany when I was on the 574th in Hanau. And that's where I met my wife, and I basically the personnel records, because when U.S. soldiers were in the Army, they were just like Churchill said, mm-hmm. or England said, the U.S., they're overpaid, oversexed, and over here. A young soldier, that probably to a certain extent might be kind of true. I mean, you're 18, 19, 20, 21. And at that time, you got to remember, the American dollar was worth a lot in the world. I mean, when I was there in 70, 71, it was 4 to 1. 4 marks to 1 US dollar. And so, you could buy a Volkswagen or a Karmann Ghia for $900 cash, pick it up at the factory, and, in our case, the Army would send it over if it's your possession. And so that's where I met my wife, and she was one of these, like, service club girl or a donut Nolly. Mm. The Army would wind up giving any EM, just enlisted man, a place to go. One, you'd be kind of lonely and bored, doing the military stuff, let's say if you were a mechanic or something, and you could go there, you get free coffee, free magazines, play pool, get a guitar and play that, work leather if you wanted, and it was pretty much free. It was just because then you'd be off the economy. The U.S. soldier would be off the economy, or he'd kind of get into trouble, you know. You could see the 21-year-old German guy who had this girlfriend, you know, getting his girlfriend picked up or hit on by this U.S. kid that was making 4 times more money than, you know, he would ever see at the time. So the Army said, we'll give you this, this, and this, you know, if you just stay here kind of on base. And Pat ran one of those bases or one of those service clubs. And she hired me to kind of clean up after the day was done, empty the waste paper baskets and straighten the place out and go home 11 o'clock. That's what I did. And eventually we kind of hooked up. And when you go back from European Army duty, you go back to the East Coast, basically New York, and then you don't go to Fort Devens. You sign out of the Army, okay, and you get your DD 214, which is, you know, if you go down 320 East Silver Street, what do you need? Well, let me see your DD 214. Well, I don't know. Okay. So they'll get a copy of it from Fort Benjamin Harrison, or I think it's St. Louis now. So once I did that, I went into the Army, and I picked up Pat's car because she had a Volkswagen, and I got the legal papers so I could have the title and have possession. And I picked that up at the New York Port Authority, where the vehicles and all U.S. possessions were taken from Europe. You know, and they land there and they get checked out and stuff. And took a car, drove across the United States after I stopped at my parents' house in Salem, and we got married in Oakland because that's where she was from.
Oh.
Because there's an American girl that was sent to Germany as a civilian that worked in the Army, and we got married on this church on Highland Drive, which is kind of neat. If you ever bought any record albums from the 70s or 75, and you see this bay and all these lights in the bay from an elevated position, most of the time, most of the artists that are the photographers that took those pictures were from Skyline Drive, which this is the church where we got married on Skyline Drive. So it's kind of neat, you know. Hey, that's when we got married. You could see that exact view.
Just have the album up. You're like, yeah, there it is.
Yeah. And so came back across the United States. I got an early out by about 40 days from the Army, and
what year would you say that would be? Like what time frame?
Okay, I got married June 6th, 1971. Anniversary coming up pretty quick since it's end of May. So, and then for 76, it'd be, in that September, went back to OSU. And I took advantage of the GI Bill and went back to OSU, and I got a degree in agronomy and worked as a lab assistant for 6 quarters for Dr. Himes, doing or helping the Dr. Himes with the students grading papers and stuff for agronomy, 201, which is the major course if you're getting into turf management, any agronomic subject, because it was basically soils, understanding soils, soil formation, and taking various common soil tests, titrations for pH, and you know what the pH of the soil and how much nitrates or whatever it has in the soil. And once we got done with that, which was in December of '74, had an interview with the Soil Conservation Service. It got renamed to Natural Resources Conservation Service. Went down to downtown Columbus, 200 High Street, and interviewed him. And he said, "You grew up on a farm." That's when they were still looking for, if you worked for Department of Agriculture, they wanted you to have an agricultural background, you know, because you understood, you know, this and that, rotations and cows and getting your boots muddy, etc., etc. So I said, well, my sister, you know, got a ranch out in South Dakota, and I grew up on a 60-acre beef farm, so you're hired. Okay. I was supposed to report to Tiffin, Ohio, like within about a week and a half. Okay, whatever, we'll get it done. And went there to basically OJT, on the job training. In other words, they say, this is a compass, this is a theodolite, you know, this is the way you set it up, this is the way you level it. And every place needs a starting and an ending point for a survey, which will be a benchmark. You know, how to set that, and the kind of the easy steps in surveying that show you that. Again, the government had OJT, on-the-job training program, that time, and you're not a legal surveyor because you wouldn't want to take away professional surveying jobs from professional surveyors. So we kind of, the government had its own liability program, and so that's where you learn to survey the topography, and then they taught you various engineering procedures, you know, how to design engineering programs that were engineering practices that would help farmers solve farm problems, erosion or flooding or manure, getting the manure out of the field or storing it. So for a year and a half, they kind of just observe you, you know, can you get along with the public, or do you get in vehicle accidents or whatever.
Right. So
I went through that, and then I was sent from Tiffin to Norwalk, Ohio. And I was a District Conservationist there for about a year and a half. And then they want you to never to be in just one county for 20 years or something. So they said, you know, you're introduced to field drainage and stuff. Now I want you to get introduced to solving erosion problems, maybe solving some timber problems, solving some, get along with, you know, different groups of people. So they sent me to Geauga County, which is Burton, Ohio.
Okay.
Okay, Geauga County, Chesterland, Chardon. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was a District Conservationist there for about 5 years, and I wrote for the newspaper.
How'd they rope you into that?
Well, I mean, if you're going to be a conservationist, a lot of times it helps if you kind of write a little byline or introduce, what kind of programs you can sign up for, and we can, in the office, will send out usually 2 people, to do the survey, look at the topography, how to solve the problems, and apply a practice on, how to solve that particular conservation problem. It could be a grass waterway, it could be a rock chute, it could be better management of your forests, it could be better pasture rotation, it could be better crop rotation, or a combination of, various practices. And it all comes down to an orange book called Standards and Specs, which USDA had like 75 or 80 practices in there. And you'd kind of match up what fit the land the best. And the surveying and making 2 copies of the engineering were free to the landowner. He didn't have to. All they had to do is give us permission to go on the land, because there was a problem earlier. I don't know if you follow history and much, but during the strong years of when in the late 30s, do you remember the McCarthyism period? McCarthyism, everybody's afraid of communists and had to keep your eye out. Well, and also there was a depression, during the 30s in the United States. Cattle prices, agricultural prices were very low. And one of the remedies for increasing, like let's say, cattle prices, or taking control of disease problems in cattle, the government would bring a caterpillar, dig a big trench, and then they would literally put the cows in there or the sheep in there and get rid of them, shoot them, in other words, and cover them up. And boy, the farmers wanted to choke somebody right then and there, because, well, here you were feeding this thing for 2 years, 5 years, and that's your family living, and the government was doing this crazy thing, So basically with the conservation program, they wanted to have the right to go on to civilian property, private property, without antagonism, because a lot of farmers had antagonism against the government there. So, and that's when they came up with the soil and water conservation idea. In other words, Roosevelt, he really liked taking care of his land because he had a lot of land, but surveying, designing conservation practices, planting trees, etc., etc. And he, I don't know if it was he or somebody else designed, they wound up saying that, here, let the county have 5 individuals that would represent the soil and water district, it would be named, the farmers in the county, and then the county could ask the federal government for technical support. And the technical support would be a district conservationist and a technician, and they'll give you a pickup, and they'll give you your theodolites or surveying instruments, and you could go out on the land and survey it and bring back the information, put it on the engineering plan, draw up 2 plans, give it to the landowner so he could do it himself, or his contractor could do it. And if you did it correctly after we resurveyed the practice when it's done, you'd get reimbursed. Okay. And that was kind of the beginning of the Soil and Water Conservation District. And that's seems like kind of rinky-dink, 5 people in the county. But you got to remember, there are over 2,000 counties in the United States.
Yeah.
So that's really grassroots type of involvement with the government, federal government, all to overcome this antagonism from the Depression years, you know. And it grew, and you know, this is what coming up with the 80th anniversary of that.
Goodness, yeah.
So, and it's really kind of a way of getting back the federal taxes that the farmers are paying. All right, I get something back for the taxes that I've paid in. And lo and behold, my sister in South Dakota, I think they had 3 or 4 contracts planting, you know, practices that are appropriate to South Dakota landscape, you know, like windbreaks and pasture reseedings, water systems for cows, you know, digging a pond out and putting pipelines or tanks to where the cows need the water, or spring developments, you know, find out where the underground spring is, put in a drinking fountain, and putting a concrete pad around us so it's not real sloppy when the cows, you know, you get 100 cows or 10 cows going up to it, especially after it rains, so it kind of keeps it down. But, okay, back to Burton. I was there for 5 years. From there, in '82 of March, I went from, that was the GS9 county, GS General Schedule and federal nomenclature for employment, to, there's 2 counties available. It was Warren County and it was Clinton County. They're both GS11s because they had a bigger workload than Geauga County.
I see.
So they said, which one do you want? And I picked Warren County. His wife said, oh, you're closer to museums and libraries and schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so came here in '82, March of '82, and well, you know where the corner of Mechanic Street here in Warren County and Columbus Avenue?
Yeah, I'm aware.
Yeah, okay, well, there's a big white brick house there on the, I think it's northeast corner, a 2-story, and that was Mrs. Fugit. And I had a motorcycle with a sidecar, and I paid Mrs. Fugit about $25 a month for a room, and we had a common bathroom and stuff. And I started working at the Soil and Water District office because the Soil and Water District and soil conservation were kind of together. You know, a lot of soil and water districts, I mean, yeah, it was 5 farmers, but they had no tax base. They had no, other than, you know, a piece of paper that, you know, they thought this was the way for the feds and the locals to work and get along. The office would provide a place for the Soil and Water District to have their own secretary and have their meetings. These 5 guys or girls or a combination that would meet once a month and, you know, discuss what the conservation program would be with the Soil Conservation Service. And the District Conservationist would kind of report back on what was done. This guy installed this, that farmer did that, and 100 acres of cover crop were planted here, you know. Oh, good, you're doing something instead of just sitting on your fanny, okay? So the place where I started was in the Berkeley building, you know, right across from the Ford garage there.
Donnie had mentioned it.
Yeah. And we were in the basement, and above us was, when I just came there, the Division of Forestry. They were on the same level at the bottom level. The Soil and Water District, or SCS, was on the bottom level. And the ASCS, that was the old Farm Services Agent. It was called the Agricultural Conservationist and Stabilization Service, ASCS, because they wanted to stabilize agricultural products, you know. Back in the 1910s, 20s, there's a thing called parity price established by Congress because a lot of farmers weren't getting enough income to support their families and stuff. So Congress said, hey, let's establish a federal price for wheat. And the farmers could sell the wheat that they produced to the government, and the government would pay them or act as a collateral for a loan. And this was a way to help the farmers out. And they also established what they call like deficiency payments. You know, there'd be a certain market price, and then if it didn't meet the national market price, the farmers would get 10 cents a bushel more. And they still have that right now, deficiency payments. So that was right next door to us. So the farmers would come in because everybody, you know, wanted deficiency payment, you know, of 10, 15, 20 cents a bushel. No big deal, but you know, it'd add up. And we were on that same office, and then upstairs was also the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, okay, which moved out further on to 73 and down on Clarksville Road.
I believe I know the one. Yes.
You know where the big dam is out there, Caesars Creek Dam.
Yeah.
Okay. They were up in the Berkeley building on the second floor, and then after 69, America's probably, or not America, it was kind of America's most famous astronaut, you know, not John Glenn, but Neil Armstrong. Yeah, well, he was up there too. You know, he was kind of a shy guy. I don't think he was shy, but he just didn't want all the attention after the space flight. You know, he wanted to kind of cool it. And he was up there also. And lo and behold, probably name dropper John, I talked to Neil a little bit, and his wife Janet also on their farm on 123. It was sold like 10, 15 years ago. But we talked him into putting in 2 waterways, 2 rock chutes, and a little bit of tile. And we surveyed that for him and gave him 2 copies of the engineering plan, and they installed them just the way it's supposed to work. And so that was kind of neat. And you know, I got to shake hands with Neil Armstrong.
Oh yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. And I wondered, I talked to him, I asked him, could you appear at one of the Soil and Water Conservation District annual dinners, you know, for just a few minutes? And he said no. You know, he's been on so many big company boards. They all want to see, you know, guess who our other sponsors are on our board. I said, well, Neil Armstrong's one of them, so of course they'd want that. But he was kind of a quiet, neat guy, I thought. And after that, I finally, with the Soil and Water District, the next big thing that I thought was kind of interesting was the 85 Food Security Act.
Okay.
The FSA, 1985. I came here in 82. And in a couple of years, basically Congress said, hey farmers, if we're giving you these deficiency payments and giving you loans, you know, you got to do something to kind of help out the country. And so the way we're going to do it is we're going to rate all cropland into 3 categories. We're going to rate it HEL, highly erodible land, and you needed to have certain characteristics for crop ground to be named or called highly erodible land. It had to be a certain slope length, you know, a certain slope that would give you an erosion factor. And there were actually, in the soil loss equation, there are 5 factors that were used to determine how many tons of soil loss per acre.
Okay.
And but kind of the most important ones were the length slope and the actual slope of the ground, along with the K factor, erosion factor. And then you cranked out for every field, you know, because remember, at the same time, Donnie and I and a couple other technicians walked on a lot of farmers because they wanted tile or they wanted a waterway or whatever. So I wound up walking probably just about, well, everybody that got a payment from the feds, from the federal government. ASCS was changed to Farmers Service Organization, FSA. They received a payment, they'd send over a form and they'd say, well, Joe Smith over here runs 200 acres, you know, rate his crop ground. So I basically did, I mean, they're still doing that now, but starting in '85, and I think they gave us 2 years to rate all that ground. So I walked a lot of farms and met a lot of farmers, and you know, out of all the farmers that I've spoken with in rated land, you know, whether it's highly erodible or none, which means you can do whatever you want with it, or the big bugaboo, wetlands, which means, you know, if it was originally a wetland because of the hydric soils, the water level in the ground, and the plant species that were on the ground. I mean, some of them are kind of, some plants are indigenous, will only grow on soil that's flooded so many months of the year. Okay, so that's kind of a giveaway that, you know, you got this plant that's helping you categorize, you know, your soil and how it's rated. So wind up doing that, and at the same time, if you had highly erodible land, you had a couple options to still stay in the program and get your deficiency payments and satisfy the provisions of the FSA, the 85 Food Security Act. And that was, you could put in like cover crops, you could wind up no-tilling it, you know, not plowing it or disking it, just put it directly into last year's residue. And well, a lot of acreage got adopted to that, and now, right now, you know, you have a lot of people no-tilling. You don't see too much that's disked up, except down in the south. I mean, you go down south of Pleasant Plain along 28 down there, it's just flatter than a pancake. The water just sits there. So that's another whole area to address. So with that, probably one of my proudest achievements was contacting like 42 farmers to fly on cover crops. And I think that year we flew on like over 3,000 acres, and we had 3 planes that came down from Wapakoneta. It's north of Wapakoneta, Wapakoneta, where, you know, Neil Armstrong is off on 75.
Right.
A little town north of there were people, a company that flew down here and flew on like over 3,000 acres. And but the board member at that time was Tom Spellmeyer. The Spellmeyer brothers out on Hamilton Road.
That's why it sounded familiar.
Yeah. And Jason, who's Tom's brother's son, is chairman now. I always admired Tom because he was such a big participant. Like, he'd go up north and take his own 300 bushel truck and bring down rye or wheat to put on as a cover crop when we had the airplanes down here and the elevators and wagons and all that kind of stuff. And of course, we flew it out of Johnny Lean's airport, you know where that is, on Green Tree Road. And that was, well, that allowed a lot of people to participate in the program instead of getting into a fight with the feds over, you know, deficiency payments or why can't I get this loan? Because the loan is usually from the government at a better rate than if you went to a local bank here. And a lot of people still did, but the Spellmeyers are real leaders for that. And Tom, he actually went to Congress and testified about what's happening, at least in Warren County, and how we need cover crops, and people, whether you're urbanites or who, enjoy looking at a green field versus a brown field that's eroding, and then going to down our streams and, you know, depositing a lot of sediment down the Gulf of Mexico and making this, what do you call it, hypoxia zone, the dead zone that we're still trying to solve today. And at the same time, I give a lot of credit to Dave McElroy and Tom working with the county commissioners on the MS4 program. And that's where, if a developer is gonna, let's say, develop 40 acres or 100 acres or whatever, you know, and he's gonna put in a street, and there happens to be, you know, a stream going in there, the developer will be adding a lot of impervious area, rooftop, driveways, sidewalks, all that stuff. Water doesn't go in there, or at least
doesn't like it.
So they basically said, all right, the developer has to either, one, retain this extra water that comes off the 40 acres that he's developing, and you can do either store it temporarily or put it in some kind of a pool, which would be a retention or detention basin. Sometimes you have a pool that's created that looks like a little pond in the subdivision, and then it's got enough capacity so that if you have a 3-inch rain in 24 hours, it can hold 85% of it or 90% of it. And it prevents a lot of subdivisions and the problems that occur there. And that I give a lot of credit to the Terwilligers, George Terwilliger, he's one of the county commissioners, and Kilburns. I mean, I and Dave McElroy sat in a lot of meetings where homeowners would come in and they'd say, hey man, I bought this lot for $40,000 and put in a $300,000 home, and my porch washed away. That's not cool. And so the county commissioners voted putting in a program that requires developers to have an erosion control and water control plan for the property they're developing. And so that's one of the reasons that our budget, the Soil and Water District, when I came there in '82, I think in '83, we asked I don't know if it was Christenberry or no, maybe it was before that, to give us like $5,000 so we could meet payroll. Because, you know, Donnie wasn't on the staff yet, but you know, for Barb Huffer and Dave O'Banion and Steve Rissmiller, I mean, we couldn't get a full paycheck unless we got some money from somewhere. And the Soil and Water District winds up getting part of their payroll from the state, okay, and part of it from the county commissioners. It's kind of half and half. Well, now, especially since Neil Tunison, county engineer, you know, he agrees with this MS4 program where the developers have to control their water, you know, before they let it off site without increasing the actual runoff after they put in all the impervious areas. So, you know, our budget, they allowed the funds that the developers would pay, you know, and the county commissioners set up a schedule where, you know, for each lot, if the Soil and Water District reviews their engineering plans for controlling water and approves of it, they'd be charged a fee, $50 per lot or $100 per lot or whatever it is, and that became our MS4 program. Okay, and flood zone. Sometimes, you know, you put a lot of water in, or you get some exceptional rainfall events. People that were never flooded before, hey man. So who do they call? Soil and Water District here. Donnie, hey, tell me what I can do. But the thing is, we went from a budget from asking the county commissioners $5,000 to meet our payroll up to, well, I think it's about 1.1 million now.
Yeah, substantially.
Yeah, but that's over again 4 decades almost. So,
right.
It's not that surprising.
Yeah, Donnie cited how small the district was at the time. I think he started in 91 until
91?
now
Yeah.
still, yeah.
Yeah, so that's, I've been with the district and retired in May of 2008 from Soil Conservation, or NRCS, you know, Natural Resources Conservation Service. And it's been a fun job, because do you know Dave Lyons, the reporter?
I'm not aware of it now.
He worked for the Western Star. You know, of course, nobody reads newspaper now unless you get it online, and, you know, you get Cincinnati Enquirer. But I used to write a article almost every week and kind of give it to Dave Lyons, and they published it for, well, 10 years, something like that. And in Geauga, I did the same thing to the Chardon paper for about 3 years there. So that's kind of interesting, you know. You get a phone, oh, I read this in the newspaper, like, can you come out to the farm and walk and see if I need any waterways? Yeah, we can do that. And well, now, see, we've the engineering earlier was strictly NRCS, federal engineering, you know. But I mean, the state office has a lot of engineers that got engineering degrees, etc.
Oh yeah.
Well, Molly, she's been with us, what, 5 years, 6 years? Anyway,
something like that. Feels like longer.
Yeah, she's a civil engineer. She's got an engineering degree, and her dad was an engineer for the city of Cincinnati, and he designed a lot of the little bridge work and stuff like that in Cincinnati. So went kind of from just relying on the feds and their engineering prowess to your own engineer that, you know, is degreed and knows, you know, what's going on in the field of engineering. So that's coming. And like when I retired in 2008 in May, I changed residences from 237 Hoffman kind of across from Donnie's house where he played guitar, etc. We bought 10 acres out on Nixon Camp Road, right across from Camp Kern.
Oh.
And I went back to a little bit of the agrarian life, because Dad said, in your old years, always have something to do, you know. And when he said that, he had a few cows, a few chickens, garden, fruit trees and stuff like that. So that's what I have on my 10 acres. I'm just kind of following Dad's advice. You know, I got maybe 12 apple trees and 3 peach trees and sour cherry tree, raspberries, raised beds for garden.
Right.
And
something to cook.
Pond, yeah, cow, 2 well now. And I put a cow in the freezer every year and a half and have eggs every day and harvest sweet peas or potatoes or corn or whatever's coming up seasonally, and that's how we get along.
You were there from 2008 to when did you start your current position?
Okay, well, 2008 I retired from NRCS. That was after 35 years of service altogether, of which they counted 2 years military service. That's one thing the feds do. If you put in military time, that counts as federal time. Because I'm under the old Civil Service Act, okay? There's like GS levels that go from 4 or 5 up to probably 15. You know, those people that are Secretary of State or something's kind of probably at GS 15 or something.
Yeah, those different gradients.
And after that, I started working for Cardinal Landscaping out on 63. You know, the white trucks with the Cardinal on the side. So I worked for them for a pittance at $10 an hour. And it's, you know, really, heck, they hire McDonald's at $15, $16 an hour now. But I get to meet people and enjoy kind of the work, you know, and I keep myself physically active, so that's good. And then, well, this is 24, right?
Yeah.
Go back 6 years, so in 18 or 17, depending on whether it's from the day you're elected or when you start serving, they asked me to run for the board, they being some water district. And I said, okay. I mean, I knew a lot of the landowners and farmers already just because of the 85 Food Security Act, plus surveying, you know, a whole bunch of waterways and stuff. And Warren County was named as the county that had the most ponds installed in any one year. And I think in 1 year we installed like 33 or 34 ponds. And why was that? Well, farmers back when everybody had a cow of their own or little dairies and stuff, you needed a supply of water. Okay, so you could gather up 2 or 3 acres of water, put it in the pond, you know, pump it to the barn or whatever, and you got a quarter acre pond will have like about almost an acre foot of water, which would be like 250 to 300,000 gallons of water. Or if you need water for your garden or trees or landscape, something like that, it's great. You know, put in your pump and pump away. So that was kind of fun. What else?
How did they get you in this board supervisor position?
Well, you're elected. You know, they put your name down, and they present it as one of the 2 or 3 candidates running for the office. And I kind of had an unnatural advantage because a lot of people kind of knew me because I had walked their farm, or, you know, I got to see this field and measure this, or, you know, look at the slope and the slope length of your particular land holdings, if you wanted to participate in the government program. Now, if you didn't want any subsidies, you didn't want any payments for deficiency or anything like that, you didn't have to participate in any of this program. So it's still a free program. It's kind of up to you, but the desire for the dollar is still as good as it ever was. So that's good. And it's interesting. You meet people that are basically still farmers, still putting food on our tables, you know, the corn and the beans. And we don't really have a dairy farmer. It used to be the Shulmans, and then Robert Lewis on Zor Road used to have a pretty nice dairy farm. And then Larry Moorfield Industries, you know, he had prize Holsteins that were kind of all over sold all over the United States.
I have one of the Moorfields on my list to talk to.
Yeah. I think the wife, Larry died, but it must be his wife.
I believe so.
Yeah. And, you know, he sold his operation, at least the buildings and stuff, to Hartz Mountain.
I'm not familiar.
Oh, that was like 25 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And now Shirley, that's Larry Moorfield's wife, she still lives there on the main drag on, 132. Yeah, it goes through Pleasant Plain. You go after the railroad track and you go down past the post office, and she's like the first big red colonial brick house. And the supervisors, you know, they rotate offices in the Soil and Water District. You got a fiscal agent, you got a chairman, I'm member at large now, but they'll probably rotate me around. I was just fiscal agent for a while. I think my first term, no, maybe my second term, I was fiscal agent. And so it's kind of neat to, you know, drive down. I'd walk the farm there and put in a structure or put in a waterway or this or that. So, and you know, whenever they talk about it, you kind of ring a bell. Oh, did you do something on that farm or not? So that's kind of interesting.
I'm just going down the list here. You said, what are you doing for your daily tasks for your supervisor role?
Well, we have a board meeting usually on the second Wednesday of every month. Now we have a slightly different schedule. It used to be at 9 o'clock at 320 East Sewell Street, but now we've adopted, because especially during the summer, farmers want to get out and work the fields, so we do it at 7:30 in the morning instead of at 9, because at 9, plus you're there for an hour or two, so it kind of messes the day up. Whereas if you're there at 7:30 and there's not a real big worry, you're out of there and back on your field by 9 o'clock. Especially during planting season.
Yeah.
And
getting hold of some of the farmers around this time now,
yeah.
A little rough for understandable reasons.
What else? Molly comes up, well, like for instance, we were Wednesday, we went down to OKI, Ohio, Kentucky, and RCC, Regional Conservation Council. And basically, Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana, there's like 9 counties right in that, you know, southeastern corner where the 3 states meet. We talk about what practices are going on and who's done what, and we kind of exchange ideas. And Molly's real good. I have to give her an A+. She really calls up a lot of people. And she's a whiz on the computers, whereas I'm back from the age when you wrote little DOS programs, you know, fed them into the machine, and you get a stack of cards and, you know, write an equation in there, and then the computer would spit out a deck of cards, and you know, that'd be your program for whatever you wanted to do.
I believe we have a couple back there, in the back there.
So, more questions?
Oh yeah, I was going down the list because we talked for a hot minute here, and I'm thinking, okay, so we talked about this, and down here we have what are things that people don't know about your position or role, but what do you think?
Well, I think a lot, it's just age that people forget about the confrontation between the federal government and local farmers. I mean, a lot of people, well, I'm 79 years old, okay. A lot of people kind of forget about the Depression and what happened and the relationship between the federal government and the local farmer was, okay. And they've been trying to smooth that out. And like, for instance, the push now for everything going EV. Well, most farmers wound up being very good mechanically fixing tractors because they all had Model Ts that could be a Model T or plow your field. You know, have put a little plow on the back of it and they'll pull a plow. But now, to get, you know, if your tractor or combine doesn't start, you got to call up John Deere because the electronics and the computer is so complex, you know, unless you're a computer expert, you don't understand half that stuff. So now, you know, you need a expert that's $250 an hour to come out and see how he makes your tractor. Why isn't it starting correctly or something? So there's kind of a disconnect between the old farmers, but fortunately or unfortunately, there's still the landowners on the land that has a high value, but they don't, or like me, I'm not in step with the technology the way you should be. So that you got to bridge that gap so that, you know, we're in better relationship. But I was tickled pink working with the Saltwater District for, well, basically from '82 until now.
I was gonna say that one of the questions here, do you feel like it's been rewarding? I feel like it's pretty good.
Yeah, very rewarding. Well, I guess my main question was, you know, once you're done with college, you know, unless you have a specific skill set, you know, what are you going to do with your life? And a lot of guys really didn't, you know, that didn't have a specific degree in you know, a science or something. We're just kind of out there with a liberal arts education, kind of went, oh, I don't know if I can, you know, all right, so I got a degree in fine arts appreciation from the 13th century. Okay, who do you find that's going to pay you $50,000 or $100,000 a year to talk about that? Not too many. I like the communications between people that work the ground and the population. They're gonna, still a lot of people gonna have to be fed, and
oh yeah, that's not gonna change.
Some, you know, say, well, what we need are warehouses full of crickets and worms and stuff, because they can convert plant material into 32-35% protein more efficiently than a farmer can, you know, raising soybeans on the ground. Okay, that's one of Bill Gates' Gates's ideas.
Goodness, is it? I haven't been following him too closely.
Yeah. And what else? Well, electronic cars, you know, that the big, I mean, I got a hybrid car and had a hybrid ever since 2005, a little Honda Insight. I don't know if you remember, a little 3-cylinder. They're 2-passenger thing. Weren't very many of them made. Anyway, I got one. I kind of liked it. I mean, you got 45, 50 miles per gallon, you know. But there's a big push currently for EV vehicles, but the public just does not want to buy them. A lot of the suits, I mean, there's incentives given to basically to Tesla, about $7,000 by the federal government, and General Motors, you know, to buy electric vehicles, but they're just not selling well. The big thing is price. I mean, you can go probably $40,000 up to $140,000, and a lot of people just aren't in that income bracket. They just whack out, you know.
It can be a lot, that's for sure.
You know, it's nice. I like the idea of harvesting sun energy, and you know, but it's kind of a funny dichotomy. We as a society always look for ways, labor-saving devices, labor-saving things, you know. And then we spend a whole bunch of money on ways to go to the Y, and you have 2 hours of exercise every day at the Y and pay it. Or, you know, let's buy a $1,000 titanium bicycle so that we can, you know, burn up some energy. Which, okay, don't use your labor-saving devices and walk to work, you know. Sometimes that's practical and sometimes that's not. But it's kind of...
That'll happen coming with time, unfortunately. What are some of the challenges you've had working with the public? You've mentioned that dichotomy between federal agents going with more local folk. Is there any specific instance that you can think of that part was strained?
Well, strained. I would say I'd get, again, comments from farmers on, you know, you want to have your tractor serviced, and wow, you get this huge bill for a technician coming out, or you're waiting on some part that has to come from China because we haven't, well, maybe after the Honda plant is built up the road here, you know, and so they just haven't swallowed it. You know, like a fish with a hook, line, and sinker to go ahead 100% with electric vehicles. And the other thing with truck drivers, self AI truck, you know, going down the road with 30, 40 tons on its back, it is going to put some truck drivers out of a job. And a lot of times it's not the $150,000 a year person, it's the person that has good driving skills and is willing to work an awful lot of hours on the road. I mean, what are those, you know, then you're coming back to unemployment problems. And of course, what hits the news, oh, the unemployment rate is blah, 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 you know, and it should only be 3% or 2%. You know, then when it gets into 5, 6, 7, I want to choke somebody's neck. So
Causing some strain there then.
Yeah.
So either position, your current or your previous, what was your favorite part of that position versus when you left? So your first favorite part and your right before you left, what were your favorite?
Okay. Well, probably when I was in the middle 25, 30 years of the job was that you got to do two things. You got to meet people, walk the land, be outside or inside. You got to use math, you know, if you liked engineering. If you like to draw, you could do that. And then also, like I say, I wrote for 2 different newspapers, so you got to communicate to the public through thoughts and ideas written on some type of media. And then the last part of the question was,
so right before you left, what was your favorite part? Did it ever change? Any variance?
Favorite part? I don't know if I had any super favorite part. I kind of enjoyed it all. I kind of felt myself blessed to have a job and a career that had every freedom that America could offer. And since my parents were basically displaced persons, I mean, they went through the Stalinist eras, you know, through, 1929 to 1934, when about 12 million Ukrainians were starved to death. Yeah. They took their land and they starved the people, okay? That was Stalinism 101. Read Robert Conquest's novel called Harvest of Sorrow. He's a Harvard professor that wrote that book.
Okay. Good. Brent Strader also mentioned a couple books, and he also said to bring up Stalin during the interview.
Yeah, so. Harvest of Sorrow. And it's kind of a scary book to read.
Goodness, yeah.
I mean, almost all to the point where, you know, parents were eating their children, which is kind of scary, really. And, you know, everybody says, oh, the Tsar Nicholas was terrible. But under Tsar Nicholas, you may not like working the ground, but everybody had food because you still had your 5 acres or 2 acres or 3 acres. The noblemen were given big, nice tracts of land, and all the outskirts near the woods and near the streams where it's harder to cultivate. The villagers got that. So that was kind of, and then, of course, not just my parents, but about 2 or 3 million other Ukrainians were kind of between the German lines and the Russian lines. Right. They didn't like the experienced communism. They didn't like it. They, you know, and that's one thing I really have to give my dad a lot of credit for, that he had the guts and the gumption to leave his family, leave everything, and just drop it and you know, take a chance and go kind of follow the German front as is advancing toward Berlin, until finally you got past that and got into American or English sector of Germany, where you could. But meanwhile, they went through Dachau too. Well, you know, if you know Auschwitz, you know Dachau.
Yeah.
You know, Arbeit macht frei. You know,
work with such
gates of all the camps. They had, you know, labor makes you free, or work makes you free. Yeah. Well, see, they were. Hitler said, "Hey, man, we're gonna get rid of, you know, the ultimate solution for Jews, get rid of them, but, you know, the labor will set you free." So he's basically using you until you drop dead from working.
Right.
Except the only thing is, hey, they got to work out of you for next to nothing other than just, you know, a little bit of food every day and living in a barracks. So
give you the bare minimum.
Yeah, bare minimum. So.
Did you or your family, after the Soviet Union fell, did you guys ever make any effort to go back to Ukraine just to see how it was?
Well, as a matter of fact, I left abroad. I didn't leave it because I was born in 46.
Right.
But Dad and Mom were married like in 25 or so. And then my brother was like born in 26 or so. And Dad left his mother and grandmother back in Ukraine, and they wanted to leave somebody with the older parents, you know, and he was a young kid at that time, you know, so they wouldn't think the communists would take him, and he'd leave the young kid to take care of the 7-year-old woman, you know. So that's the way they left, you know. Dad, I'm certain, had that in the back of his mind all the time, you know, why'd I leave my kid there? But when Vera got established on the farm, she wrote a letter back to Ukraine, and through letters found out that, yeah, there were still some people there. And she went back to Ukraine about 3 times. And my dad went once. And they always asked me, do you want to go, John, go back and see where your parents, your grandparents grew up? And I never ever felt right, because I thought it'd be a disappointment, because Dad always had in the back of his mind, like, oh, black earth, wheat, wonderful, you know, way of making a living, everybody is happy, at least to a certain extent. You know, and I always thought, well, if I see that it's not like that really, you know. People are kind of, you know, when they have that, the old Jewish women, you know, that said, please send $25 for Jewish support, you know. You see this woman comes out, she's in raggedy clothes and no shoes and stuff like that. And of course, Dad told me lots of stories about, you know, when communism was taken over, and, you know, how they worked and operated. And so it was a lot of that stuff stuck in my mind. And so, but I didn't want to go back, and, you know, then it'd be a real challenge in my mind. And was this the right way to take a country from an agrarian society to an industrial society all in one fell swoop, with the amount of lives lost? And, you know, the Ukraine was kind of established way back when, back in 1066, you know, 1066, that's the Great Schism. And that's when the Roman Catholic Church says, well, yeah, we're going to split. And they said, we believe, I mean, the Eastern, the non-Roman era Catholics had everybody paying in money to Rome. And the Greeks and those up in north and east of there said, no, we're going to go and not pay you. We'll have our own little, you know, head of the church. And even in Ukrainian, Greco-Catholic means it's Greek Catholic. And that was after the schism, because we still believe in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, but we don't believe in giving, you know, 1/10 of our pay or 1/10 of our money back to the Pope in Rome.
It's so the Roman side of it.
The Roman side of it, then we'll split off. And, you know, Ukraine is a highly religious, you know, area. And one of the first doctrines that Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin had was, you know, religion is the opiate of the people. In other words, you know, when you're miserable and you want to get high and kind of float off into the clouds, well, I don't know if you've ever had any operations or anything. What do they give you for an anesthetic to kind of knock you out?
They can use opium, or they can use
propanol. The same thing that Michael Jackson had, you know, from his little doctor. Well, you know, I've had a couple colonoscopies, and they get that. Oh boy, this is not bad at all. I can take some of this. You're nice and warm feeling. I don't worry about anything. Just doze off. Well, that's what they were referring to, you know. Religion is the opiate of the people. In other words, as far as Lenin and Marx and Engels, their philosophy is that, you know, if things aren't right on earth, then you have to work, you know, calluses on your hands and poor living conditions. You can pray to God and, you know, talk about the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit and say, well, they'll help us out if we pray a little bit, and we'll build an edifice toward you. You know, we'll put up a church and put a gold dome on it and all that kind of stuff. And that all kind of started back in 1066. You know, I mean, that's why if you look at caves, they've got monasteries and caves and stuff underneath those churches, which were monks that said, okay, well, if we get gold and gather anything from the people, we'll put it as something they'll send to heaven. Well, the dome of a church, you know. And we don't wear the same accoutrements and ornaments that Catholic priests do, you know, robes and, you know, all this stuff, and really cool buildings and altars, and, you know, is kind of more the simple life and
more down to earth.
Yeah. So that's just thinking, you know, back and forth whether it's right or wrong. I like reading about politics now. There's a book, and it's going through just how humans thought about land, property rights. You know, Rousseau, Locke. You know,
good choices.
You know, and Voltaire, and how the human progression of ideas on how society should live and react with each other. So it's kind of
in your head at the moment.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting.
Oh, it all really is. To try to reel it back in a little bit. You know, I don't think we asked. What part of Ukraine is your family from?
Okay, if you can picture Ukraine, there's an industrial city up on the northeast corner, Sumy, S-U-M-I.
Okay.
Or S-U-M-Y, depending on. And my parents lived maybe like 20 kilometers south of that. So 10, 50 miles south of that. Sumy is kind of famous for having a big stainless steel manufacturing plant. You know, like you wanted stainless steel for surgical instruments, or, well, any place is stainless steel is made, you know, cups, utensils of all type. That's what it's known for. And as a matter of fact, Khrushchev, off a little bit more to the east, had a big, quote-unquote, farmer collective farm. And Khrushchev, you know, his name, I always like to think, since I spoke with my dad for a long, long time, I'd like to look kind of what the name means in Russian or Ukrainian. And Khrushchev is a bug or a beetle.
Oh.
Khrushchev, yeah.
Very unfortunate for
like Stalin, that's not his real name, but Stalin is, you know, man of steel.
Right. He was from Georgia, if I recall.
Exactly. And his name was Tkatschenko, like a real name. He had a bad experience with his own family. You know what he was into first? Meteorology.
Was he?
Yeah,
Shoot.
yeah. And then he went to kind of a little bit of a Catholic, or not Catholic, but, you know, religious seminary, and they kicked him out. But he had a driving personality. I mean, if you read, if you keep up with any communist history, it's just unbelievable what he did. Well, Dad said, see, he was drafted into the Russian army.
Was he?
Yeah, and he said when he was in an army, they said they'd give you 5 shells, you know, for your carbine.
Mm-hmm.
4 of them you were supposed to shoot your enemy. If it was Germany, the last one was for yourself. So, you know, how many soldiers would go along with that philosophy? And the basic reason was Stalin didn't want Hitler to have another male human body to help repair his roads after the war, or repair Germany or mine or anything like that. So that was kind of crazy.
I'm sure they were very aware of what Germany was operating with.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And like when 1929-30 came in, and the Soviet, you know, the name was Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, and the Soviets were like little county mini courts that were sent out all over the countryside, and it would usually be college students that were given the authority of a sheriff or a local magistrate. And one of the things, if they didn't like you and you didn't attend meetings or whatever, they could throw some brass out near your porch or near your house, and then they'd say, hey, policeman, go check out and see if, you know, if you see any shells, or because very few people had guns or pistols, and that was rare. I mean, Dad never had a pistol or a gun of any kind in Ukraine. I mean, back then it was forks and axe, and that's the way you fought. But what it was is, if they found a casing at your porch, you'd go the next day to this little magistrate, you know, and they'd send you 5 years to Siberia for labor. And
ruined somebody's life that way.
yeah, a lot of people lost their lives that way and never saw the people come back, you know, from that type of experience. It was crazy. Yeah. And there's another lady, Applebaum, that wrote a book about the communist years and what had happened. So that's kind of, well, of course, Mr. Trotsky, you know, he was kind of one of the big, during from about 1919 up through about 27, you know, there's triumvirate. There's Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky. And of course, Stalin didn't agree with Trotsky.
No.
So, you know, he ran away to Mexico, and they put an ice pick in his head and had him followed.
That whole
scenario there.
I mean, that certainly had a huge effect on your family. How did your family get over that border, by the way, between Russia and Germany? How did that occur?
Well, you got to remember, is kind of the border was the front between the Russian and German armies, and the battle wasn't like one big line.
No.
You know, it was a battle up here in Kursk, and there's another battle. But in between, where the line was kind of drawn, people would move. I mean, a lot of it was just by walking, or you'd take a cow and a wagon and take some clothes and maybe 2 days worth of food if you could carry it. So it was just on foot, a hell of a lot of it.
A little bit more porous than we usually imagine it as, huh?
Yeah, well, you usually think, and there weren't a lot of trains and stuff because the military used that for transporting shells and military equipment. But Dad says one of the things that he remembers back from that day is when the Germans were pushed back. They used a lot of horses, even in the 30s, to pull their military equipment and stuff. And of course, if you have a horse, what do you have to do? You have to have a water, you have to have hay or oats or something for it to pull all day. Well, a lot of these horses died, you know, especially during the bad winter. There's a real bad winter in 33 or 34, and they just let the carcasses there.
Oof.
And then the next spring, it was just unbelievable, you know, the carcasses there. Really, really nasty.
Mm. Well, I guess this is a broad question, but what significant times during your time in county government, or not in county government, but rather in this county, would you like to describe, like the recession, '08, or we could talk about COVID or 9/11, anything in particular stand out to you during your time in the county?
During the time in the county, I thought the most interesting time was the cover crop period, because Johnny Lane was there. Is a new practice, even though people have been doing it for centuries, is a new practice on a large scale, you know, where you'd put on cover crops over 3,000 acres. And in Warren County, when I came in '82, I don't know, you could talk to any of the big farmers, and they just basically plowed it, disked it once or twice, and planted their corn or beans. And then after cover crops and no-till came along, that was different. And you had to buy new drills. You couldn't just use the old. But at the same time, you had equipment like plows that you wouldn't use and be sitting there kind of idle. And that's kind of different. I remember going out, especially at the end of the day, and you'd see farmers pulling weeds out of their combines, because weeds would get wrapped up in the reels and inside the augers.
Ooh.
You know, because it was so dirty with the weeds and stuff, ragweed especially. And they'd be out there with, you know, lanterns and stuff, you know, taking the combine apart so they could run beans or corn the next day. And now most wheat, you know, bean fields and crop fields are, you know, weed free. You don't see a weed in, look at hundreds and hundreds of acres, and it's phenomenal.
Wild, yeah.
So, you know, you can harvest fast. I mean, now they got combines that can harvest a semi-load at 600 to 800 bushels in 3 hours, 2 hours. And that used to be a week. You could do, you know, in small combines. And, you know, if you had weed problems, you hope you get that much done. And we were lucky, Warren County is lucky, because, well, we had a port we could take it to here, you know, down Cincinnati. You know, they put it on a barge and take it to processing plants all over the world. But you know, out west, you know, they'd store beans and corn outside. I don't know, have you ever been out west, like
Not that
during
far.
late August? Well, not late August, September, October.
No,
You'd go like to
the summer.
Raccoon, Iowa, where a cruise ship went. You know, they had that picture of him with a corn cob. There'd be a pile of corn 60 feet high out, you know, in some parking lot or out in some field, because the weather is dry and you could do it. Otherwise, you needed a silo to keep it in, a granary to keep it in. So that's, you know, now they got bigger combines, bigger everything. You can, and unless you have a diesel strike or stuff, you can take the stuff down to the river and ship it off and get paid for it. So that's an interesting change between, you know, the 80s and going into the 90s, and at least for my job. Yeah.
I never would have thought of that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, Brent Strader was really talking about more of, I don't want to say holistic, but more natural ways to, not use many pesticides or to work with the land. What do you think of some of those methods that he's employed?
Organic ways are great. You got to remember, we're kind of a snapshot in time now. But America had a lot of home gardens back in the 30s and 40s. I mean, everybody grew his own potatoes, his own sweet corn, his own soybeans, and they did it all organic because the pesticides weren't discovered. They did it through crop rotations. They did it through fallow ground. In other words, not raising something in a field for a year so the insects, cycle would be interrupted and it'd die. Like for instance, hemp. Oh boy, all you're going to do is grow hemp and make, get high. In Ukraine, Dad said everybody grew linen and they grew burlap or hemp. Okay, they'd make their gunny sacks from it. They'd make their ropes from it. And if you wanted a white shirt, you grow your own linen, flax. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, so they were as organic as you could get. So we're kind of going back to what it was, except with a few modifications. They didn't know how to change the gene structure so that this carbon would hook up with that oxygen and have a different compound that the DNA molecule would react differently and have this trait or don't have that trait. I guess that's technology, but now let's have raised garden. Let's have well, hell, they had victory gardens in the 30s and 40s.
True.
That's just the way it was. So, where'd your parents grow up?
My parents grew up in Dayton. They're all city kids.
What, Wright Pat or someplace close to there?
Oh yeah, they were more of like east side of Dayton. Mom was more of a Bellbrook, but born in New York, came to Dayton with her family. But Amber's more of the farming side than I am, which is why. So any topics that you shot my way, I was hoping that any explanation has been very helpful. What are some advice you would like to give to anybody listening?
Treat people with respect. Kind of respect their background. Just do to other people what you'd like to have them do to you. We're all humans. We all got hurts and cares, and then just follow that. That's an old golden rule, but it still works.
It sure does. What would you think? What would you say you would like to say that you've learned this past? Oh shoot! Well, working with Warren County, being affiliated with Warren County, what did you say you learned by working here?
Learned that U.S. really is a great country, and why is that? I think that NRCS. The NRCS model, or Soil Conservation Service model, is used in a lot of countries of the world. Mm-hmm. You look at tea plantations or rice plantations, on the side of mountains that have been there for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, but that was usually under the tutelage of a huge labor force, from some huge landlord that was independently wealthy. But now, if you can adapt a lot of the same ideas of conservation, it's neat. You can learn a lot even from the past, even though there's an unbelievable amount of material we don't know yet about DNA and how it structures and how it will give you characteristics and take away characteristics, you know, disease control in humans. I mean, the last 10 years, well, you know, they've made new medicines and, you know, that can solve problems that we didn't even know that they existed, you know, until, you know, so that's, yeah, and the U.S. and, you know, quote unquote, democracy is, it's kind of rare. Just think of all the other autocracies in the world that don't have well, they have a forced following. Yeah, I mean, you say there's what, 7 billion immigrants that came here to the United States. Why do they want to come here? Freedom. I mean, even the smallest bird that exists in nature wants to have a place where to put its nest, to raise its young, to give it food, to teach it how to fly, how to defend itself. I mean, it's, maybe there's, you know, we all have to have a resource base to live on.
Yeah.
So let's learn how to protect that resource base, and, you know, for quote unquote future generations. Now, do we want to have unlimited generations or limited future generations that can have a certain quote unquote standard of living? I don't know the answer to all that. That's
a little beyond us, huh?
Well, that'll be the problem for people in the future. They'll have to scratch their brains and figure it out somehow.
See what we can do. Is there any additional information you'd like to add? I feel like we've covered so much. I'm not sure what I missed.
It's any additional information. Just
feel free to jump in too, Amber, if you can think of anything. You did.
I enjoyed working with the federal government and learning from them. I liked the practices that Lincoln put into effect. You know, the idea of the Homestead Act and having it up. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, geez, it's still the oppressor and the oppressed." You know, the Indians have been oppressed, you know, for so long, and we took over their land. Well, then stop technology. I mean, if it wasn't for gunpowder and the ability to suppress or slow down somebody else, you wouldn't have had that. And I don't know. It's unravel a lot of questions. You may get the answer, you may not.
I mean, well, I suppose though.
Well, thank you so much for
allowing
me to,
along. My goodness,
you know, verbalize so much. I don't know whether it's useful or not. I guess you guys. I didn't know a guy like that worked for the county.
I really appreciate it, and I feel like I learned quite a bit. Thank you for coming, and I suppose this will conclude the interview.
Oh, did I sign?